I'm here with Lynn Burditt, who is a private hybrid client in our DPO Pro course. That is the highest tier, so she has access to all of the stuff in the VIP tier as well as private coaching with yours truly. And we're just going to talk a little bit about her experience. You're going to hear from her directly what she has enjoyed and why she enrolled and how she's doing so far. So maybe that can give you some insights in whether or not that tier or the course itself is a good investment for you. Thank you, first of all, for doing this because it's so helpful to me as a small business owner, right?
Yeah.
To get to hear from, real people who found me somehow and enrolled in my course. And I think it's also super helpful for any potential student that's out there that's trying to decide, like, should I enroll in this course, yes
Mhm.
or no? And then on top of that, what tier should I join, you know?
Right.
So let me ask you about that first, because you are enrolled at our highest tier, which is the private
Yeah.
tier, which gets you access to, everything that's in the VIP course, basically all the coaching calls and all of that other stuff too, all the resources. Then you also get private calls,
Right.
a couple of those. And we still haven't done all of them for you. We still have a couple left to redeem. But what made you decide on that tier versus like the self-study or versus the VIP tier? What was the
A
deciding factor, do you think?
great question. One, I found you by accident. I
I
was
love those accidents.
doing a search, I had a friend whose 90th birthday was coming up. And so I've had tons of photos, and I was trying to figure out putting together a book or a little
Mhm,
movie or some kind of slideshow. And I was trying to make it simple for myself because I do mostly Apple and they changed a bunch of things.
mhm.
And there were several articles that you had written that I wound up directed to and I read, and they were actually really, really helpful.
Oh, good.
And then through that, somehow I found your actual site.
Mhm,
So it was sort of by accident in that. And as I reviewed the site and thought about the different levels, this is one of those pieces of, how do you, the risk reward
yeah,
factor, I guess.
yeah, exactly.
The site is really well organized. The ability to do self-study, no, I can do it on my own. Nobody knows whether I've done it or not. I get the self-reward. And to go to the articles and to be able to read them. And then I also know myself. And one of the things I know about myself is if if that's the only piece I use, then I have to self-motivate in
Yeah.
order to do the rest.
Mhm.
And so I started looking at the group piece and I kind of went, oh, being on a group call, not I've done that for work for all these years, not
Yeah.
sure I want to do that. But I pushed myself on that end. And then I also, in knowing myself, realized that I'm probably not going to be as effective as some folks at asking the right kinds of questions to really make progress, or not wanting to maybe impact the group because perhaps feeling like my questions are too mundane or whatnot.
Mm.
And so as I thought my way through it, I kind of went, all right, you've got the economic resources, which is probably the limiting factor for some people, but I had the economic resources and I thought, this gives me every piece. I've got the access to the website, the recordings. I can
Mhm.
do the group piece, and then I can do one-on-one,
Yeah.
and have that element where, uh, as you well know, because of a whole variety of things, I haven't made as much progress as I had hoped to, and yet in many ways I realize I've made more than I had expected to,
Mhm.
if that's helpful. So to me, the highest level tier, what was really great about it is it gave me everything. It
Yeah.
was kind of like getting a 360.
Yeah.
And the piece that I got that I wasn't expecting, one was your team effort,
Mhm.
you and Amy and others. And then the other part was recognizing the benefit that the conversation you provide among people who are doing this either to make a living or to supplement their income and help others.
Mhm.
That conversation has been really amazing for me. So I never expected that piece.
Yeah.
And so many of you have different elements that you each kind of lean towards different styles, different ways of communicating. And so one of the things I've gotten out of it that I didn't plan on, forget the DPO part, is just
Yeah.
watching human dynamics, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
And I say the problem solving that happens, being able to see the way that creativity comes into play. So I never expected all those, but I did know myself well enough to know that I would do better
Yeah.
with the level where every once in a while you're going to nudge me and say, you
Mhm.
haven't made
Let's go. Yeah.
you haven't made that next step you told me you would do.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah. That's really insightful. I think to know yourself at that level is so helpful because I'm like that too. I know myself and I kind of know how I respond in different situations. And I feel like a lot of people might not
mhm.
necessarily. They kind of hope for the best. But I mean, this is one of those courses. Well, all my courses are interactive, but this is a course that when you join, if you don't do the work, it's just nothing's going to happen. I mean, that's in every learning
Right.
situation, right? But when you jump in and dip your feet, I think you realize just how big of a field this is. So it's
Yes,
interesting that it's such a niche in the organizing world, but at the same time, it's such a vast niche. I mean, it doesn't go maybe wide, but it goes incredibly deep. And there's so much
absolutely.
that you don't know that you don't know that you never might have known, about certain pieces of this.
Yeah. That
Um,
was my biggest aha,
yeah,
was that
yeah.
I didn't know what I didn't know.
Hmm.
And I realized that even after 20 plus years of using Apple and photos and the variations of it, part of what drove me to this was when Apple took away Aperture and I was trapped because of having used that for so long. And what I learned was I didn't actually even know how the organization worked. I
Mm.
thought I did.
Hmm.
I thought the folders I was doing and the various things, but I had no clue where the original photos actually were, what was going on. And I thought, how can this be?
Yeah,
I've been doing this for all these, for decades
yeah,
and didn't realize that
yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing. So,
Yeah, it's so interesting too, because we find that too. We have a lot of pros that go, as you've seen in the courses
mhm.
and in the coaching calls and all that. We have a lot of pros that come through. Obviously, DIYers, anybody's welcome to join,
Yeah.
but we specifically have a lot of pros join because I think they see that they get
Mhm.
to participate in so many different scenarios, not just one
Yeah.
program, but multiple different programs and so many variety scenarios that we talk about. Um, and it's funny too, they say the same thing sometimes. I'm like,
Mm.
oh, I've been doing it this way. I didn't realize that I
Yeah.
could do it this way too. Or like we just had a call earlier today and you saw how many pros were going, wow, mind blown at this little
It,
tip.
it, yeah. And
Um,
and I do think that piece, one of the things that I observe in your calls is great organization of the calls and using the questions that people share with you to sort of stimulate the dialogue, and you're responding to them and answering them or having Amy or others help, and yet you're also effectively using that to help guide things in particular ways that I find actually moves people forward. And
yeah,
so it's
thank you.
answering those questions, so you're not avoiding that, and
Mm-mm.
yet it's actually taking things and allowing them to go deeper.
Yeah, and one thing that we always try to do, which is a fine balance to try and accomplish, is to make sure that beginners feel equally
Mhm.
valued and appreciated as advanced students.
Mhm.
Because when you have so many students who are pros or who are advanced, it's sometimes scary for newbies to jump in or to feel like they're a part of the conversation. And we try very hard to not
Yeah,
feel like, or to make it feel calm, welcoming, steady, and like no question is a dumb question. And we talk about
right.
all of them and all of that. So I know I'm curious to hear from you how you felt when you first jumped in, because that is, that's unless you
Uh,
don't want to
yeah,
share, but
that's a great question, and it's one that I have to remember back because I'm
yeah,
I'm now
yeah.
in year
Because you're pretty
two,
advanced, yeah.
year two, and it's one of those pieces that I think initially my tendency is, well, I was in a leadership role in my work. And
Yeah.
so I had a tendency where, I would often be the one who was talking or facilitating or leading out. And yet here I was on something that perhaps I didn't know as much about. And so, and even though no question is a dumb question, I didn't necessarily want to take up people's time with that. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
as I think back to it, and I think I've shared this before, one of the things that I learned so much about is the questions that people ask
Hmm.
and that they formulate. And sometimes because they have words that I don't have, they just know how to name it. They're a little bit farther ahead. And so
Yeah.
something that's percolating in my mind, but I don't know exactly how to ask it. I
Yeah.
could ask it 5 minutes long type question.
Yeah.
Someone else asks, and I find that extremely helpful. Initially, I probably didn't know like who's a pro and who's more like me,
Interesting.
who's
Yeah.
trying to learn.
Yeah.
And I do think that's one thing I've gotten more awareness of over this last year is now I can kind of tell, okay, these are the people who are trying to help others.
Hmm.
And these are the ones who are um, working their way through. And so I find it again that the effort that you all make really is inclusive. It brings everyone into that conversation.
Yeah.
Um, and and I learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
And as I think back to like when I first joined, would I have been more nervous about the pros, or was I just nervous because at the time I felt like I had thought I knew stuff and I realized I didn't. And so I don't know that that made a lot of difference to me.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and that said, it was challenging just to be in that group setting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did like the feature of the way you package things up. I liked that feature and I used it to force myself. So
Yeah. Well, we're
and
glad you
I
did
will say,
that.
when you have the conversation about all the different tools, every once in a while I go, oh gosh, how do you really decide?
Yeah.
And you're really effective at saying you just pick something and you go with it,
Mm.
and then if you have to adapt later, you adapt. And and that's probably been one of my biggest challenges. I won't say I'm making progress because I know what I'm going to go with. And yet because I haven't made the degree of progress I had hoped to, I'm still at that place where, well, I could still change my mind.
Hmm.
And so,
You can always
um,
change your mind.
yeah,
That's the key because, and that's the go, and that's what I really thank you for bringing that up because that is something I really want people to understand about the process. Like, even if you make a decision, it's not the end of the world if you change that decision at some point. You know,
right.
the reason we teach a universal workflow that works in so many different programs is because you might need to change.
Yeah,
Because we've seen programs like Aperture go away, because we've seen iPhoto to Apple, photos,
yeah,
Lightroom Classic to Lightroom CC. Like we've seen all those changes and it keeps changing. And we need that universal workflow to make sure that we can move it when we need to. So, you know, I sometimes I think people maybe attach a little bit more fine. I don't know what the word is for it, but like, yes, it's the final decision and we go with something, but it's not the end of the world if you need to change at some point. Change is good.
yeah.
Change happens.
As I think about that and reflect on it, one piece I might realize is that as you look at the age distribution of folks that you might be engaging with, people who are kind of more on my end, like I'm sort of tech savvy, but I also went to school in the days when we didn't even have calculators, right? I remember my first handheld calculator cost $100. It would add, subtract, multiply, and divide,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any of these things, but I'm relatively savvy. And
Absolutely.
yet if you were to compare me to a 25-year-old today and what they might have available to them, kind of reflecting on those differences, because one thing I'm realizing is I don't think I ever thought aperture would go away, right?
Yeah.
It was just my brain didn't work that way. It's like, well, I paid money for this program and it's on aperture 3 or 6 or whatever. So
Yeah.
it never even crossed my mind. And they warned me for like 5 years that it was going away. And I missed it.
But that's a long transition though, because then if
Yeah.
it lasts for that long, you're like, well, do they really mean that? It's
Yeah.
still here. After three
Yeah.
years, you're like, really?
And so it does strike me that as you think about young people today,
Yeah.
and maybe trying to bridge that gap of the 25 to 45, 45 to 65, people in different eras, that universal workflow piece that you're focused on, I think is extremely valuable.
Hmm.
It's because I'm still a little chagrined with myself that I didn't actually know, okay, and we just had this on the conversation today. Where do the photos actually live? Where is the real photo?
Hmm.
And I thought I knew that in my work, and I didn't.
It's
You know,
not
so
easy to pinpoint, as you saw, because again, we had several pros trying to figure out
yeah,
where the photo actually lived. And, and again, we need to go back and look again. But it was because it was such an advanced workflow that was
yeah,
going on. And sometimes it's just not that easy. And
right.
I also want to make the point too, which I think people need to hear, of that sometimes the folks who are slightly more experienced, slightly higher in age, have a little bit better control of
Mm,
their photo collections because they didn't grow up with the technology. They grew up in a time where you had limited clicks and you were more
true,
careful with how much you took and what you kept. And they're also used to folder systems and filing and being more, I guess I should call it manually organized,
true.
right? Because you needed to have more skills back in the day to keep track of things.
Yeah.
And I sometimes that actually is a huge advantage. Like a lot of the younger clients that we get in, they're used to searching for things and
Yeah.
they don't know how to browse. And that's okay. But again, if they don't get the search result, they don't know where to go from there necessarily.
Mm.
So
So a totally
it's not,
different skill set.
yeah, it's a different skill set because you just didn't necessarily have that. As a, I don't know. It's just a
Yeah,
different time, you know?
it
Sometimes
makes a
more
lot of sense.
technology takes over and maybe you lose some of those skills that you otherwise might have, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm somewhat in between, I guess. I was born in 1980, so I'm old enough to remember not having a cell phone. I'm old enough to remember not having a computer, but I'm young enough that I started early enough to learn all these things. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yes.
I feel like I have a foot on either side of that in a way. And I
As
was
a
very manually organized growing up because the technology wasn't there, but I grew up with the technology in a way as it advanced. So, yeah, it's just there's very different levels of skill that are involved, but I do find that a lot of the concepts are more easily grasped by people with
mm,
some life experience because they have those skills in the back pocket.
that's a great insight. I
Hmm.
hadn't thought about it that way. And it's very true.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
actually just gave me a flashback to having to diagram sentences in English
Yeah.
back in high school, which I don't think you had to do, but
No, no, that was not, yeah. But I do remember writing a couple of essays on a typewriter, not a computer. So you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
I've got some experience on either
there
side.
you go. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what do you think what was your main motivation for joining? Was there a specific project that you had in mind, that you wanted to, was it photo books? Was it just really that you wanted to figure out some replacement for aperture, or did you have some sort of creative idea? Ideas that you
It
want to go with?
That's a great question. And I probably had parallel motivations. One was because aperture moved before I realized it, and I the backup that I had which is one thing I will say as part of your workflow, the multiple backups that you
Mhm,
encourage are very valuable.
mhm.
I had a backup, and it turned out that my backup disk didn't work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so they recovered most of my photos, but they weren't necessarily organized the way they had been, which was also then the piece that I learned about folders and where were they really lying.
Yeah.
And so one drive for me was just getting organized and realizing again that one of the things that I had never totally understood was that the main photo is always in this other place, and then you can put it in other folders and whatnot, but that's not necessarily your main folder. And I would name things, and then I actually had thought I was organizing them,
Yeah.
and then they wouldn't be in the right order when I went to put them into a slideshow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was learning that on my own, and I thought they were all related. So that getting organized and replacing aperture was a real key thing for me. And then the other part that Apple had iDVD, which they got rid of,
Hmm.
and then also iMovie.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I loved with those was being able to put together, calendars, movies, books, those kinds of things. And for me, the challenge is I have so many photos, probably not a lot compared to some of what you see, but you know, um, somewhere between 50 and 100,000 photos. And if I ever get all of them on, it'd be closer to that end, which is a lot for me, given that I've never organized my photos. I haven't put on keywords. I haven't done the star ratings. I haven't done any of that. And so to try and find a way to do the creative work when
Yeah.
you haven't put that part in place, I
Yeah.
had those two drivers. Um, the biggie for me though was I think I loved the term that you used about coaching also in the organizing. I served as a leadership coach in some of my work. That was one of my side
Hmm.
things, and I thought, somebody who can help coach me through this.
Hmm.
They're not doing it for me, but they're helping me
Hmm.
do the work. Was really attractive. Um, and knowing that I didn't know enough to get organized by myself.
Yeah.
So if I had one driver, it was I better rescue this system quickly or
Yeah.
I'm in big trouble.
Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes I feel like it's hard to get a grasp on the
mhm,
entirety because there's so many moving pieces and
yeah,
so many things happening and devices nowadays and all that
yeah,
that it's hard to really get a handle on what's going on, which I think is where our DPO flow process is
mhm.
very helpful. How did you feel about that? Was that like, did you enjoy that visual? Because I find that a lot of people really feel like that
Uh,
solidifies like what's
I,
going on.
that the flow visual is extremely helpful.
Yeah.
It helped put things in context where you know all these different things that you have, and it helped you to name them and
Mm,
then actually see that there's a way to piece them all together.
yeah.
And so I really love that visual in terms of that because prior to that, it's, like I still have two phones, a work phone and a personal phone. I've got like three various computers, all those different things. And I didn't know how to put things into a structure. And that visual gives you a sense of you can get from here to there.
Yeah, it's the idea I think of, and especially too when we have families who have, multiple phones,
Yes.
multiple computers, maybe different operating systems, like all of
Hmm.
those things. It's not that don't necessarily understand how one device works or where the photos go, but it's the connection between all
Yeah,
of them and figuring out where it's all consolidated and like where is it
yeah,
all backed up and how do we access it? And it can be a lot. It can be a lot to
it
understand.
can.
Yeah.
And I think the piece with your DPO flow visual that's really effective in my mind is the way that you can just kind of move it around
Hmm.
online and start moving elements around and
Build it.
and
Yeah.
just make those connections differently, you can very quickly help someone see that possibility,
Yeah.
simply through the piece where you're having them lay it all out, starting to put things together. And once it's sort of like our brain synapses, once they start seeing the flow that you're connecting, I think it actually creates more awareness and just like happened on the call today, that problem solving creativity kicks into gear. So
Yeah. Yeah.
very helpful visual.
Yeah, I appreciate that because that I feel is like the key for a lot of people to get a grasp of what's happening. It's so
Hmm.
hard otherwise to wrap your head around what's going on when there's so many
Yes.
moving pieces. Um, yeah, I really think that that's helpful for a lot of folks to try and it lets you see where the bottlenecks are. Like,
Yes.
oh, and where the problems might be occurring, because then you're like,
Correct.
well, oh, wait a minute. Is it actually going here or is it going somewhere else? And yeah,
Hmm.
it's just
Yeah. And I've seen you do that several times with people.
yeah.
You know,
Questioning
yeah.
the system. Hmm.
Another piece that I thought was extremely helpful, and it's maybe why I don't always want to ask a question on the class because I have that guilt feeling of I know this is already in a conversation before or it's in the DPO flow workshop.
Yeah,
And if
that's
I just go back and watch it, the answer's already there. I shouldn't ask this question. But the structure that you put to that, having the workbook for the DPO flow workshop, the calls, the rapidity with which you get those posted, the way that you've got them spaced out where you have a time and you can click on what the topic is, and then having the links to materials is extremely impressive. So I find having that resource available
yeah.
has been phenomenal. And it also helped me at the beginning. I would try to go through different calls and look for topics that were related to something I was trying to do. And it kind of allowed me to make progress without necessarily having to ask a question. And it also kept me from asking questions because, like I say, I felt I'm old enough to have that Catholic guilt version, even though I'm not Catholic, of if I just went back and watched, I don't know the answer.
But that's okay. I'll tell you a secret, okay? The secret is, I maybe we haven't said it out loud a lot for the beginners, but we probably should. A lot of the pros really enjoy it when the beginners ask questions because the pros, especially the budding pros, in their head, they're going, I know how to answer that. And then they hear me and Amy answer it and they're like, nailed it. I know exactly what and then that helps them
Right.
get that confidence of what they would say to one of their clients.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
That's a great
They actually
insight.
like it because in their mind, they're able to process how would I handle this situation? And it's
Ah,
very actually very helpful for them. So we don't, and that's one thing we always encourage questions, even if it is a repeat question. There's always somebody new on the call that's never heard it before. And it always leads to an interesting discussion. And repeating, like is just the
yeah,
way to get things sometimes to stick. Um,
correct.
and sometimes scenarios change and updates make things differently and all of that. So yeah, it always, I guess, is a current question in some ways because
That's
there's
a great
some changes.
insight.
Yeah, yeah.
And I hadn't thought about that, for the folks who are
Hmm.
budding into that as a little bit of a career field,
It's a boost.
it's sort of like team teaching in school,
Hmm.
having that opportunity. So,
Yes, and I think you can see also, it's so cute actually. I think you can kind of see the pros that are starting to jump in and help answer
mhm.
questions every now and then.
Yes.
You can kind of tell now who's turning into a pro and who's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Which
It's
is one of the things I really like about the group is that range of not only
I agree.
personalities and styles, but people who are trying to do different things with the work. I, I think that's a really nice benefit of the group dynamics.
Yeah, and like I said, it's such a deep niche, even though it is a
Mhm.
niche that, um, we have people who specialize just in photo books, just in Apple, just
Mhm.
in Lightroom, just in Mylio, just in this or that. And while I try to maintain some sort of, broad knowledge of everything,
Yeah.
Every now and then there will be a specialized something that somebody else can jump in and answer that I haven't necessarily come across. And I find that we all learn from each other, you know,
Yes,
and all of that. So it is a really, really cool thing to have the group calls.
it
It's
is.
always really good interaction, and everybody's nice. And we have the best students. I feel like everybody's so sweet and so helpful. And yeah, one thing that, maybe the people who are watching aren't necessarily aware is that we put, the time-stamped questions and
Yep.
answers and links and all of that, the script basically for the video. So
Yes.
you can search for something if there's a topic you're looking for. You can see what the questions are without watching the
Right.
entire video. So
Yep.
if there's a question that applies to you, you can jump straight to that piece in the video
Yes.
and not have to browse through everything and all that. So we
I,
we try to make it easy to
it-
find for
and
families.
it's a great tool. That's one of the things that was an unexpected benefit for me. And as you mentioned, especially when I was trying to problem solve a particular item, I could just do that, and I went through like 3 or 4 different ones at a time, and it was like I was making progress without having to send you a question or do that. And I actually felt like I accomplished something. So the structure that you all put to that is phenomenal. The way that you and your team members work together, I think is truly impressive. And it's almost like you're mind melded, like you can read each other's minds,
Yeah.
that you know how to help each other and how to be in support and to utilize your strengths. And so I find that to be just a great element with things. The other piece I'm trying to look at my notes. I actually wrote down notes
Oh,
but like you can't see them from a distance. So
that's
um,
great.
trying to make sure I don't miss that, but I'm going to stop looking
Like I
for it.
said, I have the best students, like people who jump in and do the work and take notes and yeah, all of that. It's like it's such a delight to see all of you succeed and actually do the work and actually come to these aha moments. That's my favorite part.
Yeah,
When like today, when somebody has an aha moment, I'm like, yep,
yeah,
got it. It's
yeah,
just the best. It's just the best.
yeah. It's truly phenomenal. It's one of the pieces too that I've also done is I've told other people I was doing this. Because as you know, with coaching, one of the things is how do you hold yourself accountable?
Hmm.
And so other people that I used to work with that I might still be doing coaching calls with or something, I've told them that I'm doing this. So they're holding me accountable and questioning me about, so what's it about that you're not making quite as much progress as you thought? And I think that's one of the other things I wanted to share with you is, I haven't finished everything that I had hoped to.
Yeah,
It has nothing to do with your program or the elements associated with it. It's, life gets in the way, right?
yeah.
And I've made more progress than I actually ever expected to, and I would have never made that progress without all the elements put together. And I think that's one of the beauties of what you've put together, Caroline, is like I say, the online elements, the various courses. If you do the VIP thing, the calls, the information that's available for that, having the one-on-one coaching,
Hmm.
all of these things, and being able to go back and relearn and try things,
Hmm.
I think is something that's helped me make progress that otherwise, with the things that have gone on in the last couple of years, I probably would have just quit, right? Just given up and said, well, that was a nice idea,
Yeah.
and move on to something else.
Yeah.
But you've got the parts and pieces of the entire three. I was going to call it 360,
The
but it's
360
almost like
experience.
720. It's more, think of it as a globe rather than a circle.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a great way.
And so I can't remember what that turns into, if it's 720 or 1440 or whatever, but you've got the full comp complement of items
Yeah.
that people can refer back to. And um and for me, being able to jump on your website. This was the other thing I was going to mention. So, like if I can't sleep and I'm jumping on the website at, 1 in the morning, I can watch the program that I wasn't able to be present in and make progress and take notes. It's so awesome. And I think that's the other piece is seeing people from around the world
Hmm.
participate or seeing you be able to participate when you're in a different country.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which happens
it's
a
that
bit.
reminder of, that whole global aspect of things and that we are one world. And so for me, you're in many ways, you're living out values that I treasure. And so I love to see that.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's a big, I mean, that's a big part of who I am, what I do, what I teach,
Hmm.
My company has those core values of, no matter where you're from or anything like that,
Right.
you're welcome. Just be a good person. Like that's
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're kind and then you're welcome,
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it shouldn't matter. We all have photos no matter where we're from, and we should all be able to enjoy them. And not everybody has access to the same stuff, in different
Right.
places. And because I travel so much, I get to see a lot of that.
Hmm.
So it's funny how everybody has the same problems, but we need to come up with different solutions based on what's
Yeah.
available and based on what they need to do. Like our friends from down under, we have quite a bit of Australians and New Zealanders in our courses, and
Uh-huh.
they have trouble sometimes printing books or getting certain archival supplies or whatever because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
companies don't necessarily ship, or same in Canada, like it's more expensive. And so we
Right.
sometimes have to make a lot of adjustments for folks, but um, that also is one of the values that I hold. Like we should all
Yeah.
have a good photo collection and we should all be able to enjoy it, no matter who
Hmm.
you are. And it really is something I deeply care about and want to promote.
Well, it shows up.
I'm
And
glad.
that's, I think, one of the pieces that in addition to seeing the enthusiasm and the energy that you and Amy and some of your other folks bring
We're a
to
happy
this
bunch.
is it is like you're living your values. And
Mhm.
it's that piece like when you feel like you're walking on air, it's when all your core values are lined up about something. And when you feel a little out of sorts, you're probably rubbing against one. It feels like you are visually expressing that.
Yeah, I'm
And I
glad.
don't know how to put that into words for you in a testimonial,
No,
but
I appreciate that. That's a great way of putting it because I do feel like, I started my business in a very different place than I am today, and it's been a while. It's been now 15 years or so. So it's taken a bit of time to sort of maybe get everything up and running the way I wanted to and the way and how I wanted to serve
yeah,
people, making it gel with all the travel and all of these things and finding the right team and all of that, right? It's a work in progress always, but I
right.
think at this point for the last few years now, we've had it running pretty smoothly. I feel like
Yeah.
it's kind of gelling. So we're
If
enjoying ourselves and we have fun together. I hope that shows.
good. It does. Like
Yeah.
I say, at times it's almost like you've done a mind meld
Yeah.
and you all know how to, be able to answer each other's questions, or you can see there's
Yeah.
a look that passes and something happens,
Mhm.
and that's a great thing to observe and enjoy it while you have it, you
Yeah,
know.
I'm definitely
Yeah,
I'm very lucky. I work with some amazing people
you
and
do.
yeah, just again, I when I hire or when I add somebody to the team or whoever I decide to work with, I really hire on character.
Mm,
Um, Really that's it. Character and attitude.
yeah,
Because everything else can be taught or it can be fixed or it can be
awesome.
adjusted somehow. But I can't fix a bad attitude. I can't fix
There you go.
uh, values that don't align. I can't fix any of that. So as long as we are gelling, then we can work out the rest. So
Yeah,
that's kind of where we go with that. It's
that's
working so
awesome.
far.
Oh, and just to go back to what did I had a goal
Yeah,
that made me
yeah,
think of the 90th birthday party. I actually did manage to put together a book for the
yeah.
90th birthday party, and I put together an iMovie that was about 30 minutes long,
Wow,
and
that's great.
that was well received. We'll just put it
That's
that way. So
great. Oh, that makes me so happy. Yeah, that's the whole point, right? I was just talking to some of the other ladies of the organizing sort of being a means to an end.
yeah,
And though we can geek out over it and it's fun to organize, sometimes, we want to make it a point that people understand that we're trying to get you to a point where you don't have to necessarily spend all your time organizing, where it's just
right.
the system is up and running and you just kind of
Yeah,
just maintaining it now. It's just that one-time setup and getting it to fit to the right
yeah,
person and all that, and then it kind of is
yeah.
smooth sailing from there. But yeah, remind me again what program you're using now. Is it?
I've been using Apple, and so probably the photos one,
Hmm.
and it's just because that's what I've had everything on,
Yeah.
and and all my computers over the years have been either Macs or
Hmm.
various ones. So I did, yes, yeah. So I'm probably an Apple lifer.
Girl, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But every time it's one of the things that always gets me intrigued when you all are talking about some of the browser systems and whatnot, is I keep thinking, oh,
Yeah,
that might be actually quite handy to use. So, which
yeah.
is another one of the learning things that I enjoy, that you're not just focused on one approach,
Hmm.
because if all I had taken was a class on Aperture, when it went away, I still don't know anything. Well, I know something, but
That
I
just,
don't know
yeah.
the full suite of what should I think about for organizing. So
Hmm.
I think your effort to try and do a full suite of things, and to have a little bit that you can have people dabble,
Hmm.
is really valuable.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I want people to understand what it takes to organize. Like, what's the skill of organizing?
Mhm.
What does that entail? The concepts and like what is the workflow that, because
Mhm.
organizing is just like there's a universal workflow that works, and whether you're using this program or that program,
Right,
the steps are still pretty much the same. Um, and that's not necessarily the approach that all teachers take. I think
right.
it's in some ways harder to put it together a course like this because there's so much and I
Yeah,
have to be mindful of how much I give. Too much is
yeah.
not good and too little is not good. It's fine balance. But I also didn't feel like it was the right approach for me as a teacher to go and say this is the only program you're going to use and this is what you need to use and just do a
Mhm.
deep dive in that, because that just leaves so many other scenarios unanswered. And it
Mhm.
just would, I don't know, it's just not who I am or how
Yeah,
I want to do things. I want to promote lifelong skills, lifelong
yeah,
workflows that work no matter what program you're in. So if you see like an Aperture go away, okay, you're like you switch programs, but
yeah.
the process is still the same thing. Um, yeah.
And and one piece with that, and I think as you've put it together, you probably had some of this in mind, either intentionally or unintentionally, is it's also about life organizing, right?
Yes.
Not just
Yeah.
photos.
Yeah.
You can actually take your workflow and apply that to your life.
Hmm.
Um, if somebody was helping you organize your life, they might use slightly different words than what you have in the flow because of how you're structuring it.
Hmm.
And yet you can translate that diagram to
Hmm.
your regular life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
The organizing process is the organizing process.
mhm,
We
yeah,
have a few additional tools that we don't have in, like, if we were doing your closet, for example,
yeah,
like deduplication is more
yeah,
manual. Um,
yes,
but yeah, it's really not that difficult to translate, like you said,
yeah,
some of the
yeah,
concepts. It's pretty much the same idea. You consolidate, get rid of duplicates and trash and stuff you don't need,
yeah,
organize, back up. I mean, it's pretty simple overall. Um, but doing it in the right order is key.
yes.
Otherwise, it doesn't quite have the same results. So,
And thinking about that, if I was going to encourage someone to sort of join your process or the group or whatnot, the number one thing I would tell them is it would be worth their investment. If they've got the resources, it's totally worth their investment. They not only learn skills and some structure that they can apply in many ways, they become part of a community. They wind up being part of a community of people they may never meet in person, most likely won't meet in person. And yet it's a dynamic, creative, problem-solving group that they'll learn from and enjoy and look forward to dialoguing with. And then they also have access to resources that they can function with independently. And so I would, no hands barred, absolutely sign up again.
Oh, I'm
Even
glad.
knowing what I know now, of, oh, I
Repeat.
I don't know what I'm doing. It's just it's been extremely valuable. And I did go back and forth as I was looking at my credit card numbers and typing them in and going, okay, well, and I just said, you've got to leap in. This is like jumping in the deep end, and I 110% am grateful that I did it. And I
Oh,
think anyone would be if they're truly want to make a little bit of progress. And
yeah. Yeah, we go, we go all in, I feel
yeah,
like. It's like
yes,
if you're just sort of half committed, it's probably not the right fit, but if you really want to get this done with once and for all, I feel like
yeah.
it's the right fit because we'll get it done. The question is,
You
do you want to be involved, basically,
right. Yeah,
in
yeah.
that? Yeah.
So
Well,
totally awesome.
great. That's great
And
to hear.
and that is the part, thinking back to the globe perspective, I think that's what you've created is sort of a sphere that you can spin the sphere and pick out which elements are helping you
Yeah.
at which time, and which pieces are going to be most helpful for you, and you use your flow to help create the roadmap or whatever
Mm.
that allows you to create the sphere around it. So
Yeah.
that's my little image for you
I like
today.
that. I like that a lot. That's a nice way of putting it. Sometimes you guys are much better than me at explaining things. But that's why I enjoy doing some of these little interviews, because like
Yeah,
I said, I think it really is helpful for people who are sitting there, maybe they're on the fence, not sure, is
yeah,
it worth it? What do I need to know beforehand? And it's like you don't
yeah,
need to know anything because we got your back, but you
yeah,
do need to jump in and
yeah,
be brave and just kind of leap and trust us a bit and trust the process and just get going with it. And there's no reason you can't be successful if you do that. I think that's
absolutely.
actually all
Yep,
courses, all learning. Like you just got to go for it sometimes.
yep. It's basically the lifelong learning process, and you all are role modeling it in
We're
ways
lifelong
that
learners, all of us.
I
Yeah,
say, and
absolutely.
it will benefit people well beyond
Yeah.
photo organizing, for example. So
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of that. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that it's been a
yeah,
positive experience. We look forward to having you for a long time in the community, you know.
I'm
And I think
planning on
you're
it.
going to start to answer a few questions here and there, every yourself, because you're getting pretty advanced. Like, we see that too. The people who
Yeah,
stay in it and they start to sometimes surprise themselves. It's like, oh, I knew that answer. I knew that
right.
answer and all that.
Yeah,
It's nice to see.
yeah. It
Yeah,
is nice when that happens.
it
Yeah.
is
So,
definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you, Lynn. That was so
um,
helpful. And yeah, and for anybody watching, if you have any questions on DPO Pro, feel free to reach out, email or DM or chat or however you want to get in touch with me. We're happy to answer any questions you have. So thanks for watching.